Welcome, everybody, to the Huddle, KGUT9's weekly streaming sports talk show. I'm Jason Barr, joined by Parris. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
Doing pretty well. A lot of things going on. Got to love that.
A lot to talk about, and we'll start with Arizona basketball and one of their best weeks of the year. So much for them not being able to win on the road. UCLA goes to the Mountain Schools, two teams that I believe previously had not lost at home, and they win both games, including a very impressive 3-overtime win at Utah, followed by the win at Colorado, in which they just missed, again, scoring 100 points, missed free throw at the end. Otherwise, they would have had 100 points. And that leads us to our poll question, which we'll start with, which is something new this year that we're doing. And the poll question for this week, Pat, what was most impressive about Arizona's 3-0 win at Utah? Pelle Larsson's career-high 27 points. The fact that in almost a game and a half, because it was 3 overtimes, only 8 turnovers. What about Kylan Boswell? Looked like his shoulder was seriously injured. Yeah. Comes back and tries to help the team out at the end of the game. So that's our poll question, and you can vote at kgut9.com/poll, and we'll see what everybody thought was most impressive.
All of the above? No, I won't get off that easy. I think Pelle Larsson, he won Player of the Week in the Pac-12 for good reason. The 27 points was huge. I go back to that game, the triple overtime game at Utah, and how they were able to get the job done. And the fact that, for Pelle Larsson to play such a big role going up against his former school, and, a lot's been said about him leaving and coming here, and it's been many years. I get it. And there's probably not a lot of people, but still, you want to do well. You want to show off as to why you went to Arizona, and you want to win that game. And Jason, they just hadn't done it there. Since 2015, 16 or something like that season?
2015 in Colorado.
Yeah, 2014-15 season. Yeah. So at Colorado, and then at Utah also, they don't win there all the time either. It's a tough trip. Probably more tough for the schools that are at sea level than the teams that are at least a little bit of altitude here. But you get the point. And to win that triple overtime game, then to come back and just roll Colorado the way they did. I thought that was probably the most impressive win I've seen, probably going back to early in the season when they beat Wisconsin here so badly.
Pelle Larsson had his best week of the season. Oumar Ballo had one of his best games at Colorado. And I tell you who had his best game of the season was Jaden Bradley. Mm-hmm. And this is also a Wildcat team that has not gotten a ton of production off the bench. They've been inconsistent, and even KJ Lewis had a rough game at Colorado. He's going to be a fantastic player, by the way.
Right.
And I think all three of those bench guys who contribute can be starters next year. I think very highly of all three of them. But Jaden Bradley played really, really well.
Yeah, he did.
If they can get that from him and that from Pelle Larsson and Oumar Ballo looked healthy. Sometimes there's a little question mark with his hand earlier in the year. Didn't look like there was anything ailing him at Colorado, and he had an aggressiveness to him. Shouting every time he slammed the ball. We talked about how we need a little of that swagger. We need a little of that assertiveness from Arizona, and we saw that in those two games.
Yeah, you certainly did, and it's well documented that Caleb Love can be a little cold shooting every once in a while, but the fact that he just keeps after it, and nothing scares him, nothing's going to deter him, and he contributed to both wins, obviously, and they're back to where I think a lot of us thought that they'd be this time of the year, but we were a little concerned because they hadn't quite gotten there when they were losing those games on the road.
Oh, and they had taken a step backward too because they started the year so strong, Pat.
Well, they did, and maybe what I thought they came out of the gate so fast because they had that summer where they went overseas, and I just thought that they had the pedal mashed to the floorboard, and they were off and running. They beat Duke, they kill Wisconsin, and down the line, and their only hiccup was really Purdue and that stupid multiple overtime loss to FAU. And all of a sudden, I think the rest of college basketball kind of continued to get better, and Arizona really kind of maybe stagnated a little bit. But now we see them getting back. And Jason, it's no surprise to me that when they started playing better, now they probably caught back up and maybe even passed some of the top 10 teams. And now Arizona suddenly back up on number 5, and you see teams like Kansas really struggling right now. They've got some injury issues. But teams like that had looked so good a few weeks ago, now all of a sudden it's Arizona that looks good, and it's those teams that are a bit, having a little bit of a plateau maybe.
Yeah, and they're again flirting with the number 1 seed. They've got the next 2 weeks at home, home against ASU, and then I believe the next 2 games after that are at home.
The Washington schools, yeah.
Got a good little stretch here, so that means they can avenge the Washington State loss, and put a stranglehold on the conference.
And I think really, Jason, if you look at it, they have ASU here, then they have the Washington schools, and then they go to Arizona State. So they're really in the state of Arizona now for like 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Yep.
Yeah.
So gives them a little bit of time to rest. And,
Right.
It looks like Kylan Boswell's shoulder is going to be okay, because when he left the court there, he was
scary.
in as much, I'll say that he was in as much pain as what you would see of somebody who dislocated his shoulder.
Right.
He was kind of hunched over everything. And then you think, oh, I just hope it's separated, or because there could be different degrees of separation.
Hope it's a clean whatever, and he'll be back in a few weeks or whatever.
So
and then he's back in a few
the last
minutes.
shot in regulation, it was like, what's he doing taking the last?
And then,
I'm glad he's there.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's taking the last shot, but I'm glad he's there.
And then did you notice? And I think it was that he comes back next, and he's like left-handed layups. He's even doing now after hurting the left hand. So everything looks a-okay for him.
Yeah, so he's got some time to heal, and it's good to know Jaden Bradley can step in there and do something. But like I said, get ahead of things. I think all 3 of those guys, you put the 3 of them and Carter Bryant and add somebody, because I do think that even though we'd love to see Kylan Boswell come back for another year, he's in the 30s right now in the mock NBA draft. So I'd be slightly surprised if he did come back, but maybe he was. So anyway, I don't want to get ahead of things. But you got to like what you're seeing from Arizona basketball, and glad to see that. All right, Pat. I don't know if we have last week's poll question up, but the last week's poll was whether or not who you thought was going to bet on the game. I've gotten so many Super Bowls wrong in the past. To finally get one right, or I've gotten a little bit better at these. But I had the Chiefs winning 24-20. I probably should have put in a little OT in there, possibly. But anyway, they win 25-22 in OT. But a game really that could have gone the other way. Kansas City needed a 4th and 1 to win the game, and to convert that and win. But now we've got a three-peat, and we've got also a little bit of controversy afterwards. Some of the 49ers players saying they didn't know the overtime rules. To me, that's on the players. That's not on the coach. You have to know the rules in which you're competing. I've got to know the rules of my job. You've got to know the rules of your job. And so Kansas City now a dynasty after winning 3 out of 5 Super Bowls.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I understand like what difference does it make if they didn't know the rule? It's not like they didn't play hard, or they didn't understand that they needed to keep playing. I mean, any overtime rules, even before this one, you kick a field goal, the other team's still going to get a chance to get the ball. That's been the last few years. That's not different. But I agree. We wanted a good game. We got a great game. Maybe a little sloppy in the first half with all the turnovers and a lot of the start of the third quarter. 49ers punted on 3 consecutive possessions. But other than that, I think that you saw 2 really good quarterbacks, but one of them is far superior than the other. And in the end, it wasn't that necessarily one quarterback lost it. It was more like Mahomes won it, right? I think that Patrick Mahomes did what Patrick Mahomes does. They needed field goals at the end of regulation. They got it. They needed a touchdown in overtime, and they got it. And it's just that simple. You're looking at one of the game's best ever, and you're looking at a Chiefs team that's one of the best, 4 or 5 year dynasty runs ever.
But keep in mind, we watch football every Sunday, but a lot of people don't. And this is a Super Bowl that had record ratings, and this is a Super Bowl that is for everybody, not just football fans. And the argument that I'm hearing, Pat, is that if it takes too long to explain the overtime rules, there's a little something off. And I know, I had to explain it to a family member. And even I wasn't actually 100% sure, because they kept showing the clock the whole time.
Right.
It's like, okay, if the clock doesn't really matter, why are they showing the clock? And then, we talked about how, well, there's a 2-minute warning, and they have to, at the end of the second quarter of overtime and the switching of sides. But here's how you would have to explain the overtime to someone. Well, if the team that gets the ball scores first, the other team will get a chance. But if the team that gets the ball first and scores a field goal, they have to at least get a field goal. If the team that scores first gets a touchdown, they at least have to get a touchdown. But a safety would end the game. And it's a lot to unpack and explain. Yeah. And I wonder if it would just be easier if you say, you know what, in the Super Bowl, you're going to play 1 quarter of overtime. Whoever's winning at the end of the quarter, wins the game. If it's still tight after that, next score wins. See how much faster that was to explain? I don't think it would have changed who won the game, but I think it makes it easier for the casual fan to understand. Your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting take, now that you explain it that way, because yesterday when you and I kind of kind of bumped into each other and just you threw that at me, I was kind of like, I don't know. But now I'm starting to consider it. It might be an easier way, as you said, to explain it to people. It might be a more fair way to do it as well, and just say it's a quarter of overtime. It's one quarter, 15 minutes. Whoever leads after that doesn't matter. You could each score 2 touchdowns and we'd still be tied, or one gets a touchdown and a
That's how
field goal.
soccer overtime works.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something that should be first. There's no controversy in that, who gets the ball or whatever, and there's still few scoring. That's something that should be sudden death. And they play a full quarter of overtime.
I'm coming around a little bit, Jason, to your thoughts. I'm just very happy that at least both teams get to possess the football. Unlike the previous overtime, only other overtime in the Super Bowl, and that was when the Patriots won it, and they were the only ones that possessed the ball in overtime. So at least I think they got that part right, but they could tweak it.
Yeah, Jason Barr, Pat Parris here on the Huddle, talking all things Arizona basketball, the Super Bowl, and we'll touch on a couple of more topics. Before we do that, let's go back to our poll question here. Arizona basketball was a three overtime winner, I should say, at Utah. What was most impressive? Larson's career high 27. They only committed 8 turnovers, or Boswell returning from shoulder injury. I'm leaning towards number 2, just because you see guys score 27 points all the time. 8 turnovers, almost a game and a half. That's pretty impressive. But don't let me sway you. Vote on what you think is what you pick.
I said Pella because it almost as a thank you for as an Arizona basketball fan of what he's done over these years for Arizona, but what he did in the Rocky Mountain schools, both games, not just the 27-point game, but it's 27 points for Pella Larson's impressive.
Yeah. All right. So some other things happened in college football over the last week or so, Pat. Wow. Rarely, or I don't know ever, have I seen a head coach leave a Power 5 school, one that's going to the Big Ten. I'm talking about Chip Kelly at UCLA. He leaves becoming a head coach at UCLA to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And why did that job open up? Because the offensive coordinator left to become a head coach at Boston College. But UCLA should be much bigger than Boston College. I'll give you my own take on it, because this was a little strange. We don't ever seen anything like that. Here's my take. I think Chip Kelly thought he was going to be fired at the end of next year. He's looking at his schedule. He's looking at his roster. He's looking at his career record at UCLA. And I think he's just being really proactive and saying, hey, listen, I can call the narrative myself and become an offensive coordinator at Ohio State, a top program in college football, that should have a fantastic year. That's his specialty. And he has made so much money over the last 15 years that going from making $6 million to making $2 million probably isn't going to change his lifestyle. And maybe the money doesn't even matter that much to him. But I was really surprised. Your take on Chip Kelly going from head coach at UCLA to offensive coordinator at Ohio State?
Yeah, I'll go one step further. I'm in agreement with you, but I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to say he knew that he didn't have the support of the athletic director, probably that much of support. He wasn't getting that warm, fuzzy, hey, we're going into the Big Ten and you're going to lead us into the Big Ten. He has one win more than he has a loss as UCLA head coach. And I think that alumni were probably grumbling and saying, we can't stick with Chip Kelly. And he's hearing all this, right? And he probably is thinking, okay, they didn't fire me at the start of the offseason, but they might fire me a few games into next season if things aren't going well. So I think you're right. I think he looked at it like, I got to get out of here while the getting's good.
They got to pay him, though. Not just for that year, but the remainder of whatever his contract is.
I don't think money matters. I think to him, probably pride is more than anything, and maybe his legacy. And you don't want to be that coach that gets fired in the middle of the season, And I think that's
okay for the coach of who happened at USC on the tarmac. It worked okay for him. You know what I'm talking about. That doesn't matter, it doesn't matter.
It
That's on the
mattered
school
for Herm
sometimes.
Edwards. Herm Edwards isn't going to get a job anytime soon. I think it does matter to a certain extent, but probably more than anything, it's one of those
Lane
ego
Kiffin is
things.
who I was thinking of on the tarmac.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin, yeah.
I think it's an ego thing, and I think that he thinks that I'll go to Ohio State. Good job. Hey, Jason, if you're not a head coach at a big time college football program, being an offensive coordinator is not a bad gig to have, right? And he'll
Yeah.
get another job if he wants another job, and if he doesn't want another job, he's old enough that he takes this job for a while, and then he rides off into the sunset. I think he's made a lot of money, as you pointed out. I don't think he needs any more money.
Very interesting career
Yeah.
move, and something maybe
But
we'll see more of it in the future. But
and I
something
know we're going to segue into this coming up, but that's kind of the pressure now that goes onto these programs that are leaving the Pac-12 and going into the Big Ten. It's massive pressure, Jay. The expectation level is going to be so high on these teams, and maybe he just didn't want to deal with that, and knew that he wasn't going to live up to that
So that opens up the UCLA job, or it opened up for a little bit,
for
and
a
then a
day. Yeah.
report comes out from a Tucson web reporter, a digital reporter, that Jedd Fisch interviewed for the job. Now, I guess that sounds plausible in the sense that Jedd Fisch actually was the interim UCLA coach at one point, as his buddy Sean McVay is the coach of the Rams. But of course, he just took the job at Washington a few weeks ago and has got a $20 million buyout. So the UCLA is not paying a $20 million
No, no,
buyout.
no.
But how much truth was that to that report? Now, Jedd Fisch denied that report both to the Athletics Until Saturday podcast and to an ESPN reporter. So Jedd Fisch denied that. We were talking in the newsroom. You say, well, maybe he didn't interview, but he had a conversation,
That's it.
something like that.
That's
There's
it.
definitely some
You're
gray area, but also you got to
Yeah.
wonder, well, maybe he's now wishing he didn't leave Arizona to go to Washington, because actually he could leave Arizona and go to UCLA right now and be in Los Angeles. Who knows? Who knows?
Well, I think it's splitting hairs to say he interviewed or they called him to get his thoughts to see, just to gauge his interest level. And obviously there's no interest level because UCLA is not going to pay that astronomical buyout. Jedd Fisch is settled in a Power 5 program, not a Power 5, an elite program, and UCLA is not an elite program anymore, while Washington still is. So I don't think there was any.
But it can be in Los Angeles there now with
It
more
could be,
money
but
from
it
more
hasn't,
money.
Jason, been for a long time, and so I don't think there was ever a situation where Jedd Fisch would go there. I think what it shows is it just shows that that Jedd Fisch would have been gone either to Washington where he went, or he probably would have been gone now to UCLA. I mean, that's kind of the conclusion I've come to, is that the U of A was going to lose him anyway.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to see what happens next year if the Eagles have a really bad year, and
Yeah.
his best friend is the GM of the Eagles, and what happens if things don't go great at Washington, and they're like, you know what, you don't have to pay us the whole buyout to get rid for to take anything can happen, right?
Anything can happen.
You
And
win the
next year, the
championship
year
next year,
after, whatever.
Washington.
Yeah.
That's why we follow it. It's tons of fun. We'll enjoy all the drama and see what happens, but that was definitely something interesting and unexpected. You didn't think we are going to see a UCLA job open up this kind of late here, and then for that rumor for Fisch. We'll have more on Jedd Fisch today on K Gun.
Yeah, it is late, Jason, because you're talking about making sure you assign your recruits right. I mean, this is already past the real sweet spot of recruiting for these kids. So yeah, it's a little late.
Yeah, Jason Barr, Pat Parris. So we'll finish up here with one more look at our Huddle poll question, and that is most impressive about Arizona's 3 overtime win at Utah. Larson's career high 27, which I think Pat's going with. I'm going with only 8 turnovers the entire game, and then Kylan Boswell returning from shoulder injury. And the last thing I'd say, their 3-point defense is not great, but if they can make some threes, and 4 of the 5 guys on the court can shoot them, they can kind of counter that a little bit. And we did see that against Colorado. We saw, Colorado make a 3, Arizona come right back and get a 3 of their own.
Well, and this team can make threes. They don't have, some teams are blessed to have, a guy that you can always count on, upper 40% to hit a 3-point shot when you need it. but they have guys that can hit threes. They have guys in the low 40%.
Oh, all four guys. Yeah,
yeah.
obviously not Ballo, but all four guys in the
Yeah, they can hit a three. And as I said, Caleb Love, he might go 5 of 20 one game, but he'll hit a couple of threes that'll keep you in the game, or
his confidence won't be shaken, which
not
is
a bit, not a single bit. And that's why I think he's actually going to do okay in the pros, Jason, because look at those boxes. Some guys go 5 for 20 sometimes. And they just
I can't go 5 for 20 off too often.
No,
in the
I
NBA.
didn't say all the time, but meaning the guy. But look at a box score. There's always somebody that has a really bad shooting night, but they're not going to stop shooting, and that's okay. You're going to shoot your way out of it, and he usually does.
I'm not sure he's an NBA player. We'll have to see. I could be mistaken.
I
He's
do.
not on the
I
mock
actually
drafts. The only guy who's on the mock drafts, I believe, is Boswell. But you know who's highest on the mock drafts is Adama Ball. Remember the player who Tommy Lloyd didn't play the last 2 years, who's starring at Santa Clara? He's a first-round pick, according to the mock drafts. Very interesting. I think Boswell's moved down a little bit. I think he's in the 30s right now as an early second-round guy.
Yeah,
obviously can change, a lot. So
I also think that there's a lot of people that think Pelle Larsson, there could be a spot for him somewhere. You'll get a good player, whether or not he sticks on an NBA roster, but he'll get a shot. He'll get a shot.
All right. So that does it for the Huddle, KGUN 9 streaming sports talk show. Hope you guys enjoyed it and enjoyed the Super Bowl. And we'll vote in our poll question. We'll have one every single week. We'll try to come up with something interesting, a little bit of fun maybe. It'll be more interesting when we're out of the sports season, but we'll figure it out at that time. For Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you right back here next week, same time.